if you could explain what is the crack?
Hey, the crack.
How can I have the crack? What's the crack?
What is the crack? You are the crack.
Welcome to episode 15 of Audio Crack. Today we have on a very special guest, Josie Zayner, a visionary biochemist, genetic designer, biohacker, and artist known for pioneering work in bioengineering and making genetic engineering accessible to the public. Also, former NASA scientist. You have a very long resume, and I've been fascinated with your work ever since seeing you in documentaries like Unnatural Selection and Gut Hack. I've been looking into your stuff in the Odin. I kind of want to start biohacking myself, but I don't know exactly where to start. But probably, my favorite of your work just from a gym bro, jock perspective was how you bioengineered your muscle inhibitor. I don't know the exact name for it.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really cool time we live in right now where it's like all this genetic engineering stuff is becoming more available. And I think society hasn't quite caught up yet, but I think it's probably going to happen pretty fast, and we're going to see some crazy stuff in the next 5 years of people trying to genetically modify themselves to do all sorts of crazy things. I'm sure you know of like Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
And that guy's fucking injecting everything. Did he try to inject this stuff in his dick or something?
What's your take on how he was getting blood transfusions from his 16-year-old son?
The thing about Brian Johnson is like, it's so hard. I'm sure with athletes, you hear this all the time. Like every athlete probably has their own thing that they believe in, like, ooh, I think that the secret to my success is like being vegan or eating meat or drinking fucking Monster Energy drinks or some shit, right? And I think Brian Johnson is kind of the same way, where it's like, there's not a lot of evidence for what he does. And even if there is, like, he can't really prove anything. It's just like, hey, I'm some guy who's doing shit to my body, and it's fun. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's interesting. But I think, is Brian Johnson going to save the world and keep us all from dying? I think there's a 0% chance that's going to happen.
I mean, seeing when his biological clock runs out is going to be very interesting to a lot of people like Joe Rogan. He does a lot of sort of bro science, for lack of a better term, where he's like shooting himself up with all sorts of hormone replacement. Like, we'll really see how much that, like, he's, in the next 15, 20 years to see how he progresses.
Well, I think the thing is like, there's a higher chance you're going to die from, heart disease, diabetes, getting run over by a car, cancer, like all these other things, right? And so it's like, are you actually going to live longer? I don't know. That's hard to really quantify, because like all of us are probably going to die of cancer way before we're going to live long enough to like have any of these longevity things help us. And so it's like, the number one way you can live longer is just not to smoke cigarettes. It's just like,
what if anything that you've seen in doing all the work you've done, what is something that's actually shown serious difference in your life, in your well-being? Like, I remember when we last spoke, you said that trying to gene edit yourself to gain more muscle mass didn't exactly work the way you thought it did. But like, how much gains did you get from that? What has actually changed that maybe someone can every day do?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily trying to get gains. It was more of like a proof of concept type thing. Like right now, you're probably going to get more gains by just going to the gym and fucking doing push-ups and stuff than you are through gene therapies. I think a lot of people want an easy pill. And, shit like Ozempic, I don't know if you know of Ozempic. It's it's one of those new GLP-1 agonists that you like lose weight. That stuff is wild. I mean, we don't quite know all the side effects from it, but like that shit works. And like, I think people are looking for that in terms of like muscle gain and muscle building. I don't think we're at the place quite yet where you can just beat normal, you know, anabolic steroids or whatever um, with gene therapies. But I don't think in the much too distant future, we'll be able to do it.
Now, when you were doing that gene therapy, what were the exacts regarding it, some of the intricacies, and what was the projected outcome if you kept doing it? I know you did one treatment and we're trying
Yeah,
to get gains, but what were you trying to prove you could possibly do in the future?
just that it's like anybody can do this shit, Billy. It's just like you could go online right now and with $500 you can order a gene therapy to, inject in yourself. What will the results be? I don't know. A lot of this stuff hasn't been tried because almost all gene therapies have been specifically in sick people, in hospitals. And so it's like there's so much room for experiment. Um, and I think that's the most interesting thing is like this stuff isn't illegal, right? There's no
Mhm.
way to detect DNA, right? So like if I ship somebody, if all of a sudden in the world gene therapy becomes more useful than, shooting up steroids,
Mhm.
like there's no way to detect it. Nobody's going to be able to be like, oh, what's in this liquid or what's in this thing? Oh my
Oh,
gosh, it's
wow.
DNA that has the gene for, this thing. And it's like, is that illegal? Can you ever make a gene that you find in your body illegal? I don't think so, right? And so I think in a lot of ways, biotechnology and gene therapy, what I was trying to show, and I think what it does is it opens up the door for just kind of like getting past all these government restrictions for things we're trying to do to our body.
Hmm. Do you think foreign governments have used gene editing therapies to bypass like performance enhancing testing in like the Olympics?
Oh, for sure. I can't imagine there's people who have, I'm sure I've been contacted by professional athletes before, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, across all different disciplines, from like mixed martial arts to NFL to a bunch of different shit. The BBC actually wanted to film a documentary about me helping somebody um, get gene therapies, but I was like, no way, like this would end anybody's career. There's no way, like I'm gonna out anybody or like,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
So they wanted you to do the therapies to an athlete and enhance their so like we there was the documentary that a lot of people saw too close to this Icarus, the
yeah,
Icarus
yeah, yeah.
project.
Uh-huh.
So they were trying to do something like that with your gene editing.
And you can never detect this shit. The thing is like the current technology in sports, it doesn't even look for this shit. It's like you wouldn't even be able to detect this shit. And so it's like people could be doing this stuff right now and nobody would know, right? It would be impossible to know because, WADA and all these other places don't test for this stuff.
So have you been consulting individuals in these fields to help enhance their performances, or you can just plead the
A little
fifth?
bit, but I think the thing is like um it's scary for a lot of people, so it's very rare that people are actually willing to go through with it. Um,
Mm.
and so it's just like it's different and it's new and it's not quite understood, and so it's just yeah. But it's like I would say, if you're in the fucking NFL or NBA or some shit like that, this stuff is not expensive. And if I were you, like you're never gonna get caught in doping tests, like, you should be you should be reaching out to some people and
So hypothetically, if you were a podcaster that wasn't subjected to any sort of drug testing and you just wanted to, lose a little body
oh, if you
fat,
wanted to try out some crazy shit, Billy, let's talk. And
we could. I mean, what would your not, I guess cycle wouldn't apply to gene editing, but how would you approach it if that was your goal?
the problem is like these things are very subjective, right? So they're
Mhm.
really hard to test results. But like, if I were just going for athletic performance, the two things I would probably focus on um, is the one I did, which is a myostatin inhibitor. So myostatin um, is the gene that stops you from or stops you from growing muscle just like out of control, right? Um,
Mhm.
so your body normally makes muscle, but myostatin kind of like inhibits that muscle growth, right? And so if you can inhibit myostatin, then your body will just grow muscle uncontrollably. So there's a lot of pictures you can find online of like animals that have these mutations, and there's naturally occurring mutations like this, and they're just like all muscle, totally jacked without working out at all. How much of that would happen? I don't know. You know, would it improve your muscle performance? It's really hard to tell because it's hard to have control for that. But that would be one.
So we're gonna throw some pictures in the YouTube. So tune into the YouTube. But I know there's Belgian blue cattle that present this gene, and it's recessive in greyhounds. Like part of one of the reasons that makes them super fast. Like sometimes you just end up with a greyhound that isn't fast but just super jacked. And it's unfortunate because they can't, they get adopted out and they're just super jacked, and the breeders that breed them for racing, they're like, well, we were looking for sprinters and we got a bodybuilder by accident. And it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And there's this other gene therapy called VEGF, VEGF,
Mhm.
vascular endothelial growth factor, and it increases angiogenesis in tissue, so blood vessel formation. So if you're thinking about like your muscles getting tired and stuff like that, this increases blood flow to tissue, and so would increase the oxygenation of tissue, so would give you better performance. So these are the two things I would probably try. How to measure performance? That's a difficult thing, right? Because it's like, how do you know if like the mile time or 100-meter dash ran before versus after is like, you know, because of training or because of practice or no practice, or so it gets a little complicated, and I imagine there's a little bit of placebo in there. The effects right now are probably, like I said, less strong than what you'd see in steroids, but nobody's ever also never really tried to like inject themselves with this shit like once a week for like 2 months.
Jeez.
So it's unknown.
I mean, the results in animals seem to be pretty promising when it comes to that.
For sure. And there's actually really funny scientific papers where they will like inject follistatin, which is the gene that inhibits myostatin, into like a muscle, and it'll just form this like muscle bump because so much
Oh,
muscle just grew right where the injection site was. It's pretty funny. Um,
now would that technically be like a tumor?
no, it's just excess muscle growing.
This might be huge for like a muscle tear.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many applications for all this shit, Billy, but honestly, like the FDA and all this shit is just, um, you know, inhibits a lot with regulation. I don't know if you follow crypto and shit like that much, but there are a lot of crypto people who are trying to do some crazy shit in like Honduras and um, other places where they're trying to test out and give people these gene therapies outside of regulation and shit like that. And, maybe that's the way to go. We'll see.
How does this different from like stem cell therapies? Because I know a lot of athletes, a lot of people go for stem cell treatments overseas because it's not legal here. Like, what's the kind of difference between these two?
Yeah, so stem cells, I actually did a project not too long ago where I extracted my own stem cells and grew them up and like turned them into all these different cell types. It was pretty wild. Stem cells are really cool because the stem cells that they normally use for these treatments can turn into different types of cells, right? They can turn into muscle, they can turn into bone, they can turn into you know, like tendon and cartilage and shit like that. But the problem is you can't really decide what it turns into.
Mhm.
And so stem cells kind of have this magical property where it's like you inject them and you're hoping for the best. But you can't really control the stem cells, right? And
Hmm.
they don't always do what you want because they're not just like magic little devices that turn into exactly what you want. So generally stem cells, how they respond is like if you put a stem cell next to, say, like muscle tissue, like a portion of the time it will turn also into a muscle tissue because of all the chemicals in there that are around it. It starts to think it's muscle tissue and it'll turn into it. Same with like bone and other stuff, but it's not always the case is the problem. And so there have been cases of people getting like stem cells injected and like a fucking bone growing out of their eye or some shit
Oh,
because
geez.
instead of turning into, the tissue they wanted it to, it turned into something else.
Jeez.
And so it does kind of have this like witchcraft thing to it because it's like um you you're kind of gambling on it a little bit, you know?
Yeah. I mean, getting like a calcification bone growth when you're like trying to get your shoulder fixed, I feel like wouldn't be the best move.
Yeah, for sure, right? So it's like, can they help you? I'm sure stem cells have helped people, right? But
Hmm.
are they going to help you? It's like unclear. What are the odds? Also unclear. And so it's like, depends how much it's worth to you. What's the gamble worth to you?
Now, you actually do gene editing therapy. How does that differ from the sort of crackpot conspiracy that like a lot of the COVID vaccines might have been gene editing? Like, can you disprove it? How close to the truth are those? How far?
So the COVID vaccines actually were gene therapy. Um, so what they did was a lot of the COVID vaccines we got in the US put in a piece of mRNA. And this RNA, what it does is RNA turns into the protein which causes the antibody response. So essentially, what you're doing is you're hijacking the cell to make a gene that it doesn't normally make.
Hmm.
What are the effects of this? Is this permanent? Can it have long-term effects? It's unclear. You know, I don't think there's been a ton of studies on the long-term effects of like mRNA therapies or gene therapies or things like that. Um, Best case scenario, you inject this into your body. It does the thing it was supposed to do, like COVID vaccine. You make the antibody, and then it leaves your system. Worst case scenario, it messes with some epigenetic shit or does something else, and like could have longer term effects. Um, it's unclear. And
Hmm.
I think with a lot of this COVID shit, the big issue is scientists, academic scientists especially, um, you know, uh, they say they know when they don't actually know, when there's no studies, no data, and any shit like that. And it's like, Billy, I'm a PhD scientist from the University of
Hmm.
Chicago, one of the top 10 universities in the world, right?
Hmm.
I won the best thesis award, published numerous scientific papers. I worked at NASA as a genetic engineer scientist. Like I'm, I'm, and it's like I'm not a crackpot. I'm not somebody who's just coming here and being like, oh, like
Yeah.
COVID's gonna turn us all into aliens and then microchips and shit. No, but it's like I think with a lot of these things we don't know, and the fact that scientists aren't willing to admit that we don't know, it inhibits any progress they're trying to make, you know?
Right. How risky was that sort of mRNA therapy as opposed to the muscle growth inhibitor therapy? Like, was it almost like one works on one system to create one type of cell, the other works on like trying to make antibodies to another cell? how different was that?
I think the thing is you have to think about it more like if I'm injecting myself with something, right? It's like I I'm one person. So if there's like a 1 in a million chance that there's a side effect, the chances that it happens to me are extremely small. 1 in a million, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a million people take it, chances are at least one of those people are going to have a bad side effect, right?
Mm.
And so I think when we think about medicines, we have to think in terms of scale, right? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like on a small scale, most medicines are safe, right? Like you're not going to get hurt, you're not going to die or something like that. But once it starts getting to a large enough scale and enough people take it, it's like, all right, even really small side effects become more relevant. And I think that's the problem, right? Is that like when you give 100 million people some vaccine, it's you can't test, right? There's no way to do a clinical
Right.
trial that's a million, like a big enough sample size to really figure out all the side effects. And so you're kind of just like doing your best and, taking it as it comes. How safe is it? I think for the general population, most gene therapies, people who don't have any immune issues or things like that, most gene therapies are pretty safe, like really safe. Like
So
99% of people, 99.9% of people won't have any issue with them. But the thing is like when you do it on enough people, that 0.1, 0.01% becomes a lot of people.
I mean, the myostatin inhibitor is now sounding more, more, like more appealing to use because small scale, one in a million. If I just start shooting up myostatin inhibitor to get jacked, if we're not doing it with millions of people, you might just get jacked with no side effects. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that like a lot of these things, when done correctly, and they're pretty safe, right? It's DNA or RNA or some shit that's already in our cells. It's in our bodies, right? Our body
mhm,
generally doesn't have an immune reaction to that stuff because it's natural. If we had an immune reaction to DNA, we die, right? If we had an immune
mhm.
reaction to RNA, we die. Though there are some, responses to some types of RNA because viruses tend to a lot be made of RNA and shit. But it's our bodies can handle these things pretty well, and it's surprising that the government isn't pushing more for more of these, right? And the other problem is they're just so expensive. Gene therapies that have come out, right, that treat disease, they
Mhm.
generally go for like $2-3 million for a single
Jeez.
dose. Yeah,
And that's FDA, what's past the FDA?
yeah.
Huh. So do you think that actually on the positive side, because we saw such a large rollout of an mRNA, uh, you know, uh, sort of therapy, do you think that that might open the door for DNA therapies in the future? And
I mean, DNA therapies have already been done, right? DNA therapy, the weird thing was about the whole COVID vaccine is like, we have never used, and I think before that, the number of RNA therapies on the market was like one or zero. There was like no, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist,
right, right.
but like, it's pretty strange that like a mass pandemic, people are dying, and the vaccines the government chooses to fund are ones that have never been tried before, right?
Now let's get into the vaccine you developed, right?
And it's just like, yeah, and it's just like, why didn't they use tried and true stuff that's been tried before? That we have vaccines already.
Because dead vaccine RNA is sort of like from the dawn of time, and like if you like look up inoculation, like there was something in I think China where there was an emperor, or they'd figured out that if you took the pus from a smallpox, yeah, if you took the pus from a smallpox victim who was suffering with it and then put it like that was a way to inoculate someone because it was like dead bacteria. Like isn't that also kind of the reason why they think people pick their nose because there's dead germs and dead bacteria in it? Or am I totally making that up?
No, I mean, it sounds reasonable. No,
Yeah.
it's totally true though, right? And it's really strange that like every vaccine up until COVID was like, and I get why people are like freaking out. They're like, oh my God, this vaccine. It's like, why at the one time in the world when we need something that works, we just didn't go with the same thing we've done for the past 10,000 years?
Yeah.
You know, just like dead virus, inoculating people with it. And it's just funny because it's just like, I'm not saying the COVID vaccine didn't work, you know, or anything like that. I'm just saying when you look at some of the choices that were made, I get why people are conspiracy theorists because it's just like, you know. So like one of the things about the mRNA vaccine is RNA degrades really easy, like really easy. And so they wanted to keep it at like extremely cold temperatures. So they need all these extremely cold freezers and all this stuff. I don't know if you remember that during COVID, there was this huge like, we need all these ultra cold freezer shortage bullshit. You know, around the time, this was before, right when they started making a COVID vaccine, myself and a couple other friends were like, wait, it just seems like a really dumb idea. Like, DNA is super stable. It's been tested before. There was a scientific paper that came out in like May of 2020, right when the pandemic started, that was like, they tested a DNA vaccine on macaque monkeys and it seemed to work, right? It seemed to protect the monkeys from COVID. And you're just like, wait, why is nobody making a DNA vaccine? It's very stable. You can store it in your fridge. It's cheap and easy to make, unlike RNA, which is expensive and requires all this custom equipment that we didn't really have a lot of. RNA requires cold storage and all this shit, and you're just like, wait, why aren't we doing DNA? Like, it was really confusing. So we made a DNA vaccine ourselves. We went online, coded it up, had it manufactured, tested it in human cells in like petri dishes and shit to make sure, you know, it did what we thought it was going to do. And then we tested it on ourselves and we saw antibody response. We did like viral neutralization assays. We saw that it was able to prevent, you know, viral particles that were inactivated from binding to different receptors and human cells and shit. And it was just like, why isn't anybody doing this? That's really strange, you know?
So how was, after you vaccinated yourself with a DNA vaccine from COVID, how did you fare against COVID?
I mean, I haven't had COVID.
Oh my God. That's insane.
I know. And I've tested, you know, I'm not saying I don't know if I've had COVID, but I've tested myself probably the same amount as any normal person, you know? It's like for the past, from like 2020 to 2023, it's like anytime you got sick, you took a fucking COVID test, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like I've probably taken a dozen or more COVID tests in that time period and shit. And as far as I can tell, I've never had COVID. That's not, you know, some of the people. So the other two people I took the vaccine with, both of them have gotten COVID. So
Okay.
you know, these things aren't like 100%. They affect everybody
Right.
differently, but like it's pretty wild that like I haven't gotten COVID at all.
Your story was one of those ones that like really like got my mind racing during COVID because I'd been looking at your work back then. You know, I was just saying like, yo, dude, like how jacked could I get doing gene therapy? how
Or
like
how big
big.
can I make a frog?
Yeah, yeah, because I used to have African bullfrogs, and they were just these huge frogs
Yeah.
that would eat mice. They were awesome, and I was just like,
They eat mice?
yeah, they used to eat
Holy
mice.
shit.
They're like cooler than snakes. And I saw your work with African clawed frogs, and I was like, it
Yeah.
can't be that different to blow up an African bullfrog. And I was looking at it, and seeing how you had dealt with DNA. Like you're someone who knew how all this worked, like
Yeah.
someone who was totally unbiased. And the fact that you made a vaccine yourself, and then sort of what happened to you after, sort of like really was screwing with my brain in that like wait a second, what is going on?
Well, the crazy thing, Billy, was that like we never tried to sell a vaccine. We never tried to tell people not to take a regular vaccine. We just wanted to create a step-by-step guide. If you needed to create a vaccine in a pandemic, how would you do it, right? And so our goal was we made like 20 videos, step by step, like how you'd order the vaccine, how you'd test it in cells, how you do all the experiments, how you test yourself, how you test your own antibodies. Like we did step by step everything. It was like, because let's be honest, like let's say COVID was 10 times worse. Like,
Right.
could we really wait a year for the government to come up with a vaccine? Like, fuck no. Like, I'm not going to wait for the government to come up with a vaccine if the next pandemic is fucking worse. Like, I'm going to try to make my own for sure, right?
But like think about if we were in like a post-apocalyptic scenario, like zombie virus, like World War Z, and we needed to find the information on how to do this. Like, like let's say you had a pocket of people that need to find a vaccine from, zombie virus. I know this is out there, but
No,
like,
I love it.
wouldn't it be good to have that information like open base?
Even, yeah, now it's good to have that information. And the fact that it's like, like I said, it's like a PhD scientist from really well-respected institution, published, It's like I have more published papers than fucking Neil deGrasse Tyson and shit,
Yeah.
It's like I studied in this field, right? I studied in the field of gene therapy, genetic engineering type stuff, right? I worked at NASA. It's like you couldn't ask for like a more legit source for this information to come from. I wasn't even like telling people not to take vaccines or anything. I was literally taking a vaccine and people were like, you're anti-vax. And I'm like,
Yeah.
God, what does this world come to?
And so what was some of the biochemistry, sorry, I'm probably using this wrong word.
No, it's fine.
I'm done. But the biochemistry you did at NASA, because that's also, I was reading into that and I was like, were you trying to create life that could like live on Mars?
Uh-huh. A little bit. I think the thing I was working on mainly was astronauts in space. When you live on the space station,
Mm-hmm.
the environment has to be like really, really, really sustainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because all your resources are on the space station. And in order to get like more water or more food or anything like that, it takes, months from Earth. The fastest they're going to be able to get a rocket up there is probably a couple months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying to create a very sustainable environment. Like the astronauts get something like 90% of their water from urine and condensation that's just captured and recycled. And so you're trying to build an environment like that. And astronauts use probably about 100 kilograms. There's 2.2 kilograms in a pound. What is that like?
220 pounds.
Yeah. A lot of plastic, right? Because you have to imagine all the food's wrapped in plastic. Like plastic is really good at packaging stuff. Everything is wrapped in plastic.
Oh.
So if you were taking a trip to Mars, say, by the time you get to Mars, it takes about a year to get there with 4 or 5 people. You're talking like, hundreds or thousands of pounds of plastic waste you have. And what do you do with it, right? You could just throw it out. But we were working on can you like recycle that plastic into like food for plants or algae, so then you
Huh.
could use it to grow stuff so it didn't go to waste. And it was really cool. I worked on engineering organisms in a lot of different ways to try to do crazy shit to you know, turn plastic into plant food.
Wow. That would probably have huge applications on Earth as well.
You'd think, but when I started working on it and had some stuff I developed, I started talking to all these companies that, waste management companies, because I wanted to figure out how it could be utilized. And a lot of people are just like, there's a lot of room still to throw out trash.
Oh man.
And it's hard to incentivize people, right? And it's just like I'm not a, fucking sustainability fanatic. I do my best, just like all of us, but it's like, how do you incentivize people to like pay you money to like get rid of plastic when like they have no incentive? Like they just have a giant trash dump that they can always just keep dumping more trash in for a long time, right? And why pay more money for something? Like, why do they care? They're just trying to make money. And so it's
Yeah.
like, it's really hard to do these things without government intervention, which sucks also, because like, who wants the government fucking involved with recycling or some shit?
Dude, I mean, there's in New York, there's this waste management plant that basically puts it on barges, puts all of New York City's trash and sells it to China. And in China, like they don't sell it to China, they pay China to take it.
Yeah,
So all those, like, we get so many shipping containers from China that are filled with stuff, and they figured out the most, economic thing to do with these giant waste containers that pile up at the ports is just fill them with trash and send them back.
yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely a thing, right?
So I mean, one day if you get so with those organisms you're creating, like helping create with NASA, like you couldn't use that intellectual property for yourself, right? Like you didn't own that
I
property.
can,
Oh, you
NASA's
can?
actually really cool like that, which I think most people don't know, is that like, when you go work for a big company, most of them make you sign away your rights to like anything you invent, but NASA does not. They're like, anything you invent, NASA doesn't hold any of the rights to it. And like, it's a little bit sketchy, right? Because obviously it's the government, and it's like, if it's like national security or in the U.S. best interest, like, you know, they can take ownership or possession of these things. Um, but generally, it's like, if you come up with something, you could use it. The problem is just like I said, commercializing something like that was really like, I seriously contacted a bunch of the major waste management companies and was just like, is this something like you'd ever be interested in? Most of them are just like, no, not really.
I mean, if you sat on that patent, it might even take like several generations. If you
I know,
just
right?
kept giving, like this, it could be the greatest inheritance of all times. Like when we finally get to the point where we need to start destroying the plastic and the Earth's, we've used up all the space on Earth.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work on that stuff since then, and people have made better ones and done better things, but it's just like, it's still, it's still not being capitalized on. Yeah, maybe in a 50 or 100 years, it's something that people will actually use.
I mean that huge trash island in the middle of the Pacific.
All right.
Just like throw some bacteria that eats up plastic and turns it into like fish food. Don't tell anyone. That would be a good use.
I know. No, I mean, I think with a lot of these things, it would be interesting because there's biotechnology has a lot of like guerrilla, like
Applications.
anarchist applications where it's just like, fuck the government, I'm just gonna do this thing and see what happens. And you know, yeah.
So are you saying that there might be a group of people who are going to try to throw out these genetically modified organisms to shrink this trash heap?
That may or may not be true. I'm not
Okay.
allowed to say.
we'll walk off to a less controversial topic. So what happened after you got banned when you put out these videos? What was the reaction from YouTube and subsequent like repeals? Like what went on with that?
Yeah, so like I said, I got banned from YouTube, which was wild because we did the whole thing. I think we did like the whole experiment, and it was like, successful. We didn't try to sell this to anybody. We didn't tell people not to take vaccines or anything. And then, maybe in like, I forget this. So we did all this, mind you, before any vaccine came out, right? So there was no vaccine available to the public by the time we had finished our testing, which was in like September of 2020. And I think vaccines became available not till like the beginning of 2021 or late 2020. And sometime in, late 2020, YouTube they banned one of my videos, and I was like, oh shit, they're going to ban me. So I downloaded all my videos off of YouTube that night, and the next morning they banned my account for life. So like I can't even log into YouTube anymore.
Was it connected to a Google account?
Yeah,
Can you log into that account?
I can log into the Google account, right? Which is also scary. So I started backing up my Google email, my Gmail, in case they ban me there. But when I'm logged into that Google account and I try to log into YouTube or use YouTube, it just won't let me. So I have to be logged out or logged into a different Google account to use YouTube. I can't even use YouTube, right?
Did you ever think about putting up these videos on any other platform?
I did, Odyssey. I don't know if you've heard of that. Odyssee. It was kind of like a more decentralized, libertarian, video place. And I did put the videos up there, but obviously it's different, right? It's like the whole world uses YouTube, and nobody really uses this other platform. So they're up there for posterity, but like, it just doesn't get the reach. And I think that's
Right.
one of the big things, I'm a scientist, but I'm also kind of like an activist, and an activist in the way of like, we need to change things in our regulation. We need to change things at how they run in most countries in regards to biotech. And people need to start doing this shit. People need to start protecting themselves. It's like, fuck. It's like you're talking about the zombie apocalypse, and it's always like, if the zombie apocalypse happens, the first people who are going to die are people who get bitten by zombies, but the second people are going to be diabetics, right? Because there's going to be no insulin, right?
Yeah.
There's all these drugs that people depend on for their life that they're being charged insane prices, and that they have no control of the means of manufacturing. And it's just like, your life is dependent on government and big corporations who could fuck you over at any time. And this just, I don't know. I think we deserve better as human beings.
How easy would it be to make your own insulin if you had to?
It wouldn't be crazy difficult. The hard part would be the dosing, right?
Oh.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Just being able to measure the dosing would probably require a little bit more complex equipment or techniques. And dosing yourself so you don't actually kill yourself, because you can kill yourself with like
bodybuilders like in the 70s were doing too much insulin and going into comas.
For sure. So it's like but it's like, oh God, there's so many things like this where it's just like, yeah, we need people to learn biotechnology. The reason I did the COVID vaccine videos wasn't because like I was trying to, distribute a COVID vaccine. It was because like people need to learn how to do this so that like we're not all killed by our governments being too slow for the next pandemic.
I mean, you're the most pro-science person I've ever encountered. So like everyone's talking about trust the science. Like, this is the most pro-science I've ever seen. Like, let's trust this side. Like,
oh, for sure. I think people who say trust the science also like never trust those people. Because it's like, you shouldn't trust the science, you should trust the data, right? It's like, who gives a shit what you tell me the science says? It's like, what does the data say? You know, I'm not just going to believe you because you're a scientist or because it was even published in an academic journal. Like, have you seen some of the shit that gets published? It's fucking bullshit, you know? So it's like, believe the data. I'm not a fucking, mindless drone, and none of us should be. It's like, I think it's okay to be pro science, but not believe all the science that people put in front of you.
So, in addition to that, some of the products you sell on the Odin, what are some like more interesting ones that have some like wider uses? Like, what would be interesting to the average consumer that isn't like trying to do anything crazy, but could change their life or help them?
For sure. I mean, so one company I run is called the Odin, the Open Discovery Institute, and the goal of the company is basically to teach people about genetic engineering and how they can do it in their homes. So we sell kits. Most of them have, are like come with an experiment that's pre-planned, so you can learn how to do genetic engineering. Kind of like a kit that you'd get to like build a little robot or something like that. And there's kits for like bacteria, yeast, plants, human cells. So we try to cover, basically anything you'd be interested in working with. My favorite is the plant engineering one, just because it's like plants are big and like being able to change something. This changes the color of plants when you inject them. It's like really fucking cool. And the goal is just to like, we're not going to be able to have all these cool things like, muscles with an injection or giant bullfrogs if people aren't doing the experiments, right? And so people need to learn how to do the experiments in order for this to happen, because it's like, I'm just one person. I can't like do everything, right? And so it's like,
some other people got to get into it because you don't have time and all the time resources, but other people might be able to like find other breakthroughs.
yeah, I'm trying to work on my own shit, It's like, fuck, I wish I had time to. A lot of people have a lot of crazy ideas. I would love to work on, making a giant ass bullfrog that can eat like a cat instead of a mouse. But, it's like, I have so much other shit that I'm trying to work on in my life, my research and stuff like that. So it's like,
what are some of the things you're currently working on?
well, a cool project that I'm working on, is kind of like a stealth biotech company right now. We call it the Los Angeles Project, kind of like after the Manhattan Project. And we're trying to build out an automated platform to basically be able to genetically engineer animal embryos to create whatever the fuck we want, like unicorns, Pokemon, dragons, like
that. So like, how exactly would that work?
Oh, exactly. So here's how it works. You get cool thing about embryos is when they start out at a single cell, they call it a zygote. Single cell. If you inject them with gene therapy shit, it goes into every cell in the animal, right? Because like that one cell then becomes every cell in the organism. So what you can do is you can take a bunch of these embryos, take like a ton, right? It's like we have, like this, this like plate, right? It can hold a shit ton of embryos. You're talking thousands of embryos, right? And then what you do is you can genetically modify each one with something different. And then you can watch and see what happens. So you can figure out, if you do enough of them, how certain animals grow wings, how certain animals have tails, how animals, and then you could take that information from these large scale embryo screens you do and apply it, and
Whoa. So I saw something about this where they tried to reverse engineer a dinosaur from a chicken egg.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is kind of the stuff you can do. Here, the thing is like traditional science is trying too hard to understand how everything works. And the crazy fucking thing, Billy, most people have never thought about is that like every cell on Earth came from another cell, right? No cell has ever been created. None. Every cell has come from another cell. We don't even know where the first cell came from. We make up weird stories, but we don't know. It's like this alien technology that we have no idea how it works, and it's just like us. It is us. It's the living things. And
Whoa.
as human beings, we're like pretty dumb when it comes to this technology, right? We can't even create a fucking cell. We're like in the galactic scale of things, we're like the biggest amateurs.
What? Yeah. So, from your understanding, is there a spontaneous generation from non-organic compounds that can explain the creation of a cell, or does it have to be
Okay,
like?
we'll get into that in 1 second.
Yeah.
But and so it's like we don't really understand biology that well, and instead of, scientists are constantly trying to understand it, but instead if we think about it just like something like AI or something, it's like why try to understand it when we could just like create it and see what happens, right? And that's kind of the approach we're coming at is like let's just fuck with things and see what happens instead of trying to completely understand everything that's going on. And yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, if you want to create some crazy chimeras, is that the right pronunciation? Chimeras?
Sure, yeah. That sounds
Yeah, I mean, like hodgepodge animals, I'm down. I mean, like as long as we could probably kill it, like with the technology we have, just in case.
like a bullfrog with a big horn. That's what
Yeah, or like,
make.
I mean, even if you created a dinosaur, I think we have enough firepower to take one down. So, I mean, like it would be pretty cool. Spice up the day.
I know, I think so. I don't know why nobody's working on this shit. Or dragons. It's like, why is nobody working on making like people think science is cool, but it's like wait till like 50 years when nobody does academic science anymore and everybody's trying to make like lightsabers and dragons and like dinosaurs. Like that's when science is going to be cool.
When the government comes and confiscates your dragon egg, like that's sick. That's like modern Game of Thrones. Like my dragon egg was confiscated.
That's what we need more of, Yeah. But getting back to the cell, where did the cell come from? I find it honestly, I think a lot of shit scientists just kind of make up because they're scientists and just like the first cell just like spontaneously happened in some liquid in like some place and all the DNA or RNA and protein just happened to be in the right place for all this shit to happen. And it's like, there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. We try so hard to create cells and we can't even create cells. And you're telling me this thing just fucking happened spontaneously? Like, no fucking way.
So, hypothetically, you worked on bacteria and organisms that would go to Mars. Do you think it's more than likely that the cell came from a meteorite, from an outside?
Or something, it seems like we were designed in some way, and not necessarily in like a god designed it, but it depends how you describe a god or like a more powerful being, right? Because it's like if you think about an ant or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
An ant has no idea what like we are gods to an ant, right?
Right.
No idea what a smartphone is, no idea how to do any of this stuff. We are literal gods to like an ant, right? And now to think that we are the most evolved being in the universe, I think is a bit a lot of hubris, a bit naive. And I think out there in the universe, outside our universe, maybe there's something that is more powerful than us, possibly, that can just create life or create worlds or design cells and all this shit, right? And it's like, I think there's a chance, like you said, like something created it, something happened, it got to Earth somehow. Like the whole idea that fucking life came from, primordial soup is just like, you know, give me a fucking break, right? Like we really believe this as scientists?
So I'm looking at the textbook because I remember like vaguely what my biology textbook said in high school, like very vaguely. And I looked it back up. And so the first cell is thought to have arisen by the enclosure of self-replicating RNA and associated molecules in a membrane composed of phospholipids.
Yep. So phospholipids are like fat, right?
Yeah.
So it's like an RNA. So you have to imagine just randomly some RNA had to have some function. And RNA, like nucleotide molecules that compose RNA, aren't even that abundant. Like amino acids are way more abundant. Like there's so many holes in these theories that it's like, I think people, it's just like what scientists have believed for so long. People are afraid to really poke holes in them because like consensus bullshit, And it's just like, I think there's a lot in the next 100 years where we're just going to be like, that was kind of a dumb idea. Scientist consensus bullshit is, they always say like science moves on when scientists die, right?
Yeah. So how hard is it for RNA to spontaneously exist? Because I can kind of follow like, oh, there was some oil and some molecules, and then I'm like, okay, like that I can follow that. Like phospholipids is like an oil kind of, and then like mRNA just like plops in there, and it was like, wait a second, how did the mRNA
I know, right? It's like I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just like, wait, and how does the cell replicate? Wait, that doesn't make any sense. So you're telling me this had to spontaneously happen like a billion times until one of them formed with self-replicating cells and material. It's just like, like you're struggling here, Like this seems like a very, like you're struggling on this one.
Yeah, all organisms on Earth today originated from a single cell that existed 3.5 to 3.8 billion years ago. I mean, maybe if we get into the realm of like math, like probability, like it may have taken a billion years for it to happen. That I could maybe see, like, because we can't understand like the vastness of a billion years.
For sure, we can't. I think I've been thinking a lot about that lately because it is crazy, right? And you're trying to think about like, but it's just, the complexity of biology and what it is, and I know these are dumb arguments that like anti-evolution people make and shit like that, but it's also like
Right.
kind of true, right? It's like, how doesn't I evolve without the ability to see, right? It's like if evolution happens through natural selection, if we came from a single cell, it's like, and I'm sure maybe somebody could think of some complex, fucked up way, but it's like inside the eye are so many complex proteins that had to evolve on their own. Some of them don't even have anything to do with vision or anything like that. And it's just like, you're starting to, like you said, we can't contemplate the vastness of 4 billion years to get here, but it's also like, I don't know if that was enough time.
Yeah, because it's like in when you think about natural selection and evolution, it's like even how many generations did it take to get from wolves to dogs, right? Like, and even that.
I know, and it's like breeding, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, shit's crazy. And the thing is we don't know, right? And I think that's the interesting thing is that like scientists are so afraid to say we don't know. And I think that fucked us over huge during COVID, because everybody was like, this is the way it is. This is what you have to do, right? And it's like, instead of just being like, we don't necessarily know, but like, you should try this shit and hopefully it works out for the best, you know?
It's kind of crazy because if your information was out there and hypothetically people made a DNA vaccine that was a traditional vaccine, like someone out there, like even a corporation.
You know what? Fucking India did.
Yeah.
They did. Like a year after we did our experiment, and I'm not saying that had anything to do with us or anything like that, but they made like the identical DNA vaccine, and that was one of the vaccines in India.
I mean, it was kind of common sense in that way.
It was just like, why? I think I don't want to get conspiracy theory, but it's like, sadly, these things in the world, there's more than just lives. It's like money, power, all these things come into play, and it's like it's really hard to control the distribution of a DNA vaccine, right? It's really hard to like patent that shit and like prevent other people from using it and shit like that. I think there's so much more at play in this shit, and I don't think it's necessarily conspiracy theory. I think it's just like the way the world works, you know?
Yeah, it's just like, ivermectin wouldn't have been as profitable. And I'm not even saying it works.
For sure, right? This is like some dumb shit about capitalism and power.
I mean, that like between the first thing that really got me confused was I once got scabies working excavation. They prescribed me ivermectin. Like for humans, clear as day. And then they start going after ivermectin like it has never been used on humans before. And I'm like, wait a second.
Oh yeah, like it's a horse drug. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like seeing what you went through and everything with creating, the vaccine in the original sense that was changed. Like that was weird. It was just weird. And the common explanation is that, the new types of treatments, easier to patent, easier to profit off of for a longer period of time, increase shareholders holdings.
And also the U.S. control, right? It was fucked up how the U.S. like wouldn't force the companies to like release the patent rights to other countries. And it's just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't we be allowing all countries to use our COVID vaccines? And it was just like the whole situation was so fucked up. And it's just like, God.
And from your expertise, I don't know if you've looked at any of the data on the DNA makeup of the first COVID molecules or RNA, like the sequencing of where it came from. Do you think there's any credence to the lab leak theory or, a pangolin to a bat?
I think we don't know, and I think that's the fucked up thing is that there's no way scientists can prove it wasn't a lab leak, and their information is so thin trying to prove it wasn't a lab leak. Here's the things we do know. I don't think it was necessarily a lab leak. I don't know because we don't have enough information. But like all the pandemics previously, right? They were able to find an animal that originally came from antibodies from animal. They were able to show like the animal, like they figure out the humans that came in contact with the animal and how it was transmitted. Like all the chain of like how the virus got into humans for like every other virus before COVID, they've been able to figure this out like 100%. But for COVID, they have none of that data, like not one. They have not been able to find like one animal in the wild that like fucking had COVID. They have not been able to find antibodies or any shit like that near Wuhan or wherever. And it's just like, this is really sketchy,
But when they were saying that like it spread to dogs and like lions at the zoo.
I mean, originally, so like the founder, like where the original founding, virus came from. Because like when this shit happened, every country, including China, was testing every fucking thing, right? They went to those markets. They tested every fucking thing. They were never able to find anything in the market that had COVID, right? Anything. And it's just like, all right, like if you can't find where it came from, you definitely can't tell me for sure that it wasn't a lab leak or something like that. And it's also just like, what do you think? China's not going to like destroy records? Or even if it was the US, if the US released, you don't think they're going to fucking burn that institute to the ground so nobody can ever find any evidence that it was leaked? Like, of course they will. You're never going to find out, right? And so I think we're stuck in this world where it's like, we'll never know the truth, but anybody who's 100% against lab leak, it's like you've been brainwashed.
So there's been some recent deaths in regards to the avian flu. So there was one in Mexico. What are your thoughts on avian flu from your expertise? Like, why is it so dangerous, people say? Because that's one that I've heard for a long time.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Any sort of like aerosolized respiratory, like anything that can be transmitted through aerosol or some shit like that, generally flus, or respiratory illnesses, they're all considered really dangerous, right? Like, most of the stuff that's really hit us all the way back to, what was it? The original, was it 1918 Spanish flu or whatever? If I got that date wrong, don't hold me to it. But all of this shit is just like fucking respiratory spread through droplets in the air. So it's like it can get pretty contagious. And when it comes from animals and stuff like that, we don't really take factory farming. We don't really take good care of our animals. So these viruses can spread and mutate really fast in animals, get transmitted to humans. And so a lot of things we've experienced, swine flu, a lot of the shit that's happened in the past 20 years has come from being transmitted from animals. So it's like, people are really worried about this stuff. How worried should we be about this? I think a lot less. Generally, I think when they have a hold on it, when they're like monitoring it and they see where it's coming from and they have an idea, it's like there's a lot less of a chance that it's going to be really bad. I think the scary thing is like the next COVID that we're not going to see coming, and the government, the US, other governments, they ain't doing shit about that. Like, what's our pandemic response? Do we have like a pandemic response government organization? Fuck no. Why not? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Well, from like the base understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't it be to create a DNA vaccine and distribute it as fast as you could?
For sure. That's I've been in like closed door government meetings with everybody, had everybody, Army, Navy, Air Force, CIA, FBI, everybody talking about this shit, and they have no idea what the fuck is going on or what to do. And it's just like, give me a break. Like, if this shit happens and it's worse than COVID, like, we're all fucked. And it's like, you all need to get on your shit and like build some organization that's going to stop the next pandemic. Because like you said, it's like we could pump out DNA vaccines in a matter of days, right? To make a COVID vaccine or some shit like that, it's not difficult. There was no genius involved. They took this protein that was a similar protein that all viruses have that tend to be immunogenic, and they put it in the vaccine, and body responded. It's like it would take any reasonable scientist 3 hours to do this work, right? And so it's like, why don't we have people ready to do this work?
Jeez. I mean, they should have had you. Like, let's get this vaccine out.
Oh, the government doesn't fucking trust me, which is fine. I don't trust them either.
Did you have any reach out from anyone after you were banned from YouTube? Was there any like Men in Black who gave you your lab a visit by chance?
I mean, I've definitely had Men in Black visit me, not for the COVID vaccine, but for other stuff.
You might divulge.
I've had way too many run-ins with the government and FBI, and it's just like, shit.
I remember reading they shut you down in regards to some of this research you were doing. Yeah, the
Oh yeah,
California authorities.
yeah. I've been charged with practicing medicine. California passed laws charged with practicing medicine without a license. That's why I'm in Texas now. It's like Texas is nice to me. But yeah, I've definitely had a lot of run-ins with three-letter government organizations.
Do they usually try to like seize your work in the files on it to sort of prevent you from getting to places, or is it more?
I don't know how much of it I can talk about or want to talk about, but some of the interactions are more friendly than others. If you can say that about governments knocking on your door, but uh, they don't know what's going on, basically. And I think it's sad, but it's also just like, who wants to go fucking, it's like, did you know that like to work at the FBI, you can't have smoked weed in like the past 5 years before you start, or 10 years? It's like, who, like, what kind of people are they, looking to hire there? It's not young, smart people. It's like the people who really don't know what's going on, who just want to use their power to oppress people.
Wow. Well, this has been an extremely enlightening conversation. Like I never put the two and two together about every cell has came from another cell, and we've never created an artificial cell ourselves.
I know, it's like we're alien technology, right? We really are. We don't understand how our own selves work. Like scientists don't have no clue. Not even like we can't even simulate a cell. They're so complicated. We can't even get close to simulating a single cell.
I mean, AI, when it hits the singularity, hopefully answers those questions. But you're basically saying like the first like origin of a cell on Earth is just as mysterious as the Big Bang.
Oh yeah, I think so. Right? Oh yeah.
That's another gap that I didn't know.
It's just like, how will you ever know, right? We can't go back billions of years or whatever, right? It's just like everything right now is just made up until we can create a cell, right? And I think when we create a cell, we're going to be like, holy shit, that's complicated. Somebody had to have created that.
Yeah.
There's no way it happened spontaneously.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the most mind-blowing thing that I took from this conversation. And it's sort of, I'm gonna have to go not meditate. I usually just go for a run.
Meditate on it. Do it.
Yeah, like what? Like, oh my god. I mean, if AI hits the singularity and is able to do complex equations much faster and figure stuff out we've never have been before, and that's in 2045. So got a solid 20 years. Just gotta hang in there.
Hang in there.
And just see what happens, because that's going to be wild.
I know.
Well, Josie, thank you so much for coming on. Been a huge fan of your work, and I can't wait to see what else you get up to in the future.
Yeah, Billy, I loved it. Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you, really.
If you ever have anything interesting you'd like to talk about, anything you've discovered,
I will,
please hop on.
I will. I'll come back in the next year or two. I'm working on some crazy shit, and something's going to blow up,
I'm so surprised you haven't been on Rogan.
You know what? I wasn't on Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan showed a clip of me on his podcast one time and called me an asshole.
Well, hey.
I don't think it was necessarily in a bad way. It was like, what the fuck is that asshole up to, And now like, this person's a douchebag, but still, So I got that going for me. But yeah, I usually don't do many podcasts these days, honestly. I just keep my head down and work, and I think that's kind of the era I'm in my life. It's like,
yeah,
get shit done era.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I think you're one of the most interesting people on this planet. So
thank you, Billy. That's really kind.
I've been a huge fan for such a long time, and this has been an awesome conversation. Please come back anytime. Audio Crack listeners, crackheads, as I like to call them, please subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube. We need a little help there. Thank you for everyone who's downloaded and subscribed on Spotify, Apple. Have a good one. And this will probably be the last episode of the week. Thanks, guys.